So hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is April, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation Environment Office. So tonight's webinar is a special episode of our nuclear webinar series, and we're here to talk with members from the Natural Resources Canada about the radioactive waste policy review. So before I get started into the webinar, I just want to go over a bit of the history. But I do want to talk about those buttons on the bottom of your Zoom platform before we start that. So you may have noticed that your camera and audio are not used in Zoom webinars. Only myself and my guests are able to be on screen, but that doesn't mean you can't interact. So the first method you have is the chat function. So this is where you can send direct messages to myself or the other speakers or even other attendees. We also have a Q&A box. So this is where you can put your questions. Do try and put the questions there in the box and not in the chat. They can sometimes get lost there or they might get missed. So just having them separate does help us in the end. Finally, we have the raise hand button. So if you're ever having issues or you need something repeated or maybe just clarified a little bit better, just use this and send me a private message and I'll make sure we get that figured out before proceeding. Also, you may have noticed we have some captions on. Those are auto-generated, so they may get some words wrong here and there, but for the most part, they are pretty accurate. They will do get Ojibwe words wrong though, so I do apologize in advance for that. So, sorry about that, I'm a little dry here. So before we get started, do you want to go over that history there? So Natural Resources Canada, also known as NRCan, met with the SON advisory team in May of 2021 to discuss the purpose and review and how to get involved. Because nuclear and radioactive waste management is such an important issue, both historically and currently in the SON territory, we felt it was important to be involved in this review and to ensure that SON voices are a part of the important policy development. This type of policy could mean a lot for how nuclear waste is managed in the SON territory. The focus of the review are on all topics related on how nuclear operations and waste management occurs in SON territory. The topics that SON members have faced with including waste minimization, waste storage facilities like the Western Waste Management Facility, decommissioning projects like Douglas Point, or waste disposal like the planned DGRs. The engagement on this will not stop here. We are going to share with SON members the report that is completed based on the feedback received by NRCan through engagement across Canada and other First Nations. And we'll continue to follow and engage in the process looking to the future of nuclear waste in the SON territory. We've also developed a survey using some questions NRCan used in their survey, and we've also developed a few of our own. So we hope that many of our SON members complete the survey so we can begin to input SON voices into shaping this policy. Now that we know a little bit of that history, let's meet the team from NRCan. So Jim, I'll let you get started there.
Perfect. Thank you very much, April, and good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Delaney. I'm the Director of the Uranium and Radioactive Waste Division at Natural Resources Canada. And I'm joining you today from my home in Ottawa, which is in the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. And I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time out of their schedule to meet with the team and I this evening. And with me this evening, I have Julie Mecki, who is a senior advisor on my team, and Haj Ahmed, who is a policy analyst as well. And in terms of context, my division, among other responsibilities, is responsible for administering the radioactive waste policy, and we're leading the engagement process on the modernization of this policy. We do have a presentation that we would like to walk through this evening, and we'll just take a moment to get that up on the screen, and we can start on slide 2. In terms of the introduction. Perfect. All right. So first, I think it's important as well to, oops, sorry. Hoping everybody's still there. Is the presentation up on the screen?
No, I think the screen stopped sharing, so we'll just give Julie a moment there.
Okay, We'll just wait one moment.
There we go. It's all good.
Okay. So if we go to slide 2 in terms of the introduction, I think really before we start getting into the presentation itself, I think it's important to first answer the question of what is policy and why we're undertaking this review. First, in terms of the policy, it's really broad. It does provide the high level principles and ideas on what should guide us. It provides a guide on how we regulate and how we may regulate going forward, or how operational decisions might be made now and in the future. It does not get necessarily into the specifics of where waste might be located, but the principles could potentially influence how such decisions are made in the future. And as part of our engagement today, we're looking to really better understand what you would like to see as guiding principles, what should be the roles and responsibilities of government, of industry, and the regulator going forward. So in terms of the question of why we're undertaking this review, it's really because now is the time to be doing this. The government is committed to continuous improvement. The policy itself has not been looked at since its inception 25 years ago. And there have been requests from interested citizens that the policy be updated. So back in February of 2020 as well, we had a review by the International Atomic Energy Agency of Canada, which had noted that while Canada has a comprehensive and robust regulatory framework for nuclear, that we should consider or recommended that we should enhance our policy to give effect to the policy framework. So since November of 2020, Natural Resources Canada has embarked on this review to modernize our radioactive waste policy. We've engaged with Indigenous peoples, non-government organizations, academics, youth, and others to gain a better understanding of the values and principles that are important to Canadians in respect to the policy. We've taken a flexible approach and tried to be as adaptive and as sensitive as we can be to the COVID-19 health pandemic. And where feasible, we've been arranging virtual engagement sessions such as the one this evening as well. Our goal since the beginning is really to ensure that the engagement process is meaningful and informed based on a two-way dialogue that is responsive to issues that are raised. We want to be respectful of people's time and capacity and priorities, because we know that there's a lot going on that's both related to radioactive waste, but also to other initiatives that are underway. And we've been trying hard to make sure that we're providing adequate timelines, in particular to allow Indigenous peoples and other participants to review the information and provide input into what you would like to see as a part of a modernized policy going forward. So if we go to slide 3, the objectives of the engagement. So sessions such as these, really the objective is to stimulate discussion on the management of radioactive waste in Canada. And second, it's to listen and obtain views on what should be included in a modernized policy going forward. So for those not available today, views and perspectives can also be submitted in written form. And we'll explain that a little bit at the end of this presentation today. So in terms of the topic areas that we cover, they tend to focus on 5 areas. So principles and roles and responsibilities being one, waste minimization, waste storage facilities, and decommissioning and waste disposal. So the topics that we have identified are essentially identified as part of international guidance for what should be important elements to consider when developing a radioactive waste policy. And to enhance our policy, we want to hear from Indigenous peoples that have an interest in radioactive waste management regarding what you see as key principles and elements of a radioactive waste policy going forward. And towards the end of the presentation, there will be some slides that identify some of the fundamental questions that April had mentioned at the beginning of this presentation and around the principles and the roles and responsibilities. The topics and the questions that we identified were not meant They were meant to guide discussion and not meant to limit the discussion. So if there are certain areas or perspectives related to the management of radioactive waste that you would like to share that fall outside of those topic areas, we strongly encourage and welcome those comments and views and perspectives. In particular on that, I think, there may be times where you may share with us your views and perspectives related to nuclear energy and radioactive waste management using projects perhaps in your own area as well. So if we go to slide 4, go into roles and responsibilities before we go into the policy discussion and provide a little bit of context. I would say first, nuclear energy does fall under the jurisdiction of the federal government, and the government's top priority as it relates to nuclear energy is the health and safety and security of people and the environment. And while the federal government has important responsibilities relating to nuclear energy, the decision to invest in electricity generation ultimately rests with the provinces. The Minister of Natural Resources Canada is responsible for the federal radioactive waste policy, and that policy sets out, as I mentioned, the fundamental principles and roles and responsibilities as it relates to waste management, which we'll get into shortly on another slide. Excuse me. So in terms of the diagram on this slide, it identifies some of the key federal departments and organizations that have responsibilities related to radioactive waste. I'll start with Atomic Energy of Canada Limited. It's a Crown corporation that was established in the 1950s for the peaceful use and application of nuclear energy. And its mandate really is twofold in terms of advancing science and technology, but also managing the government's waste and decommissioning responsibilities. The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission is Canada's nuclear regulator. It's an independent agency of the Government of Canada. And ultimately, the mission of the CNSC is to regulate the use of nuclear energy and materials to protect the health and safety and security of the environment and respect Canada's international commitments for the peaceful use of energy. And both, I would note on this slide as well that both the Atomic Energy of Canada Limited and the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, they're dotted, you'll notice on the slide that they're connected to the Government of Canada by dotted lines or dashed lines. And really that's to demonstrate that they are arm's length and both report directly to Parliament through the minister within the government. So it's they're not reporting directly to a minister. Other departments that do have a role as well, just to make note of those, there's Environment and Climate Change Canada, who has responsibilities related to pollution prevention as part of their role, also to preserve and protect Canada's water resources. We have Global Affairs Canada, which promotes bilateral and multilateral nuclear cooperation and safety, and it upholds Canada's international and legal obligations as well. Another important department would be Health Canada, which informs and advises on the risks of radiation and environmental monitoring programs. The Impact Assessment Agency, which undertakes impact assessments to inform decision-making on major projects in support of sustainable development. And finally, Transport Canada, which regulates Canada's transportation system, including dangerous goods. So now that we've provided some of that context, flip to the next slide, thank you. The map on this slide ultimately identifies the locations of radioactive waste management sites in Canada. Radioactive waste is defined as any material, whether it be liquid, gas, or solid, that contains nuclear substances for which the owner no longer has a use for and is deemed a waste product. In Canada, nuclear facilities produce a range of radioactive wastes, such as uranium mine and mill tailings, medical isotope waste, used nuclear fuel, decommissioning waste, and other wastes as well, with low level of nuclear substances. All radioactive waste in Canada, including used nuclear fuel, is currently held in safe, secure, and environmentally sound interim storage facilities across the country. So if we go to slide 6, in terms of some of the overarching principles and roles and responsibilities. So I think as we undertake our engagement, I think it's often important to sort of identify the starting point and reflect on what is in the existing policy framework and determine whether the existing principles and roles and responsibilities still hold true today, or if there are others that should be added and considered going forward. So Canada's existing radioactive waste policy framework was established in 1996, and ultimately lays out the high-level principles around ensuring radioactive waste disposal is carried out in a safe, environmentally sound, comprehensive, and integrated manner. And it also identifies some of the roles and responsibilities as it relates to government and waste owners or producers. So let's say in short, the government is responsible for the policy, oversight, and regulation, while ultimately the waste owners and producers are responsible for the funding and the organization, the management and operation of their disposal, as well as other facilities for managing radioactive waste. And so really the process that we have underway today is to undertake a review to ensure that we do have a strong modern policy in place that continues to align with international practices, but also reflects the values and principles of Indigenous peoples and the public. So we go to the slide 7. So this is, as I mentioned, we had 4 topics where we included discussion papers. So the first discussion paper was on waste minimization, and towards the end of this presentation, we'll go to our website to identify where you can find these discussion papers and the questions. So the first important topic to consider as it relates to future inclusion in a radioactive waste policy is waste minimization. Our current policy is silent on waste minimization. However, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission does require waste owners in Canada to minimize the generation of radioactive waste to the extent practicable. Canada's adopted a waste hierarchy. It's internationally recognized waste management approach, which defines a ranked list of management options from the most favored to the least favored, based on factors including environmental impact. And the hierarchy provides guidance to encourage waste producers to opt for waste management options with the lowest possible impact on the environment. The waste hierarchy states that prevention, reduction, or minimization, reusing, recycling should be favored before disposal of radioactive waste. And disposal is ultimately only the only appropriate strategy if all of the other options have been exhausted. So as such, this waste hierarchy strategy encourages reuse and recycling of materials, preventing contamination by restricting the amount of materials in radioactive areas, and assessing technology advances in waste minimization and implementing improvements to waste handling facilities that reduce the volume of radioactive waste. So in Canada, the Canadian waste hierarchy is a guiding principle for waste minimization, and aligns with the International Atomic Energy Agency waste minimization fundamentals, where the International Atomic Energy Agency member states should keep the generation of radioactive waste to the minimum possible or practicable, minimize the spread of radioactivity leading to the creation of radioactive waste, optimizing possibilities to recycle and reuse valuable components, and ultimately minimize the amount of radioactive waste that's been created by applying adequate treatment technologies. So if we go to slide 8, the next topic, which is in the second discussion paper, is waste storage. And it's not explicitly noted in our existing policy, but our policy does note that waste owners are responsible for funding and management of disposal, as well as other facilities related to managing their waste. And as you may know, Canada's has low level, intermediate level, and high level radioactive waste located across the country, generally in interim storage facilities, but also in a couple of long-term management facilities as well across the country. Ultimately, licensees are responsible for the operation of these facilities and must comply with established safety requirements under the regulatory oversight of the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, which licenses, regulates, and monitors the facilities. And while storage is not considered a permanent solution, there are a number of reasons for storing or for storage, and these include allowing for the decay of radionuclides, reducing the heat generation of the waste prior to pre-disposal or disposal, pre-disposal management or disposal, and providing storage pending the development of a disposal facility, a final disposal facility. And in terms of international safety standards, the International Atomic Energy Agency notes that storage of radioactive waste must ensure both human health and the environment are protected, both now and in the future, without imposing undue burden on future generations. So if we move along to slide 9 on decommissioning, nuclear decommissioning, which is not referenced in our existing policy, explicitly refers to the actions taken to retire a nuclear facility, location, or site permanently from service in a manner that provides for this health, safety of people and the environment. The topic's particularly relevant, I think, now, given that a number of nuclear facilities in Canada are approaching the point where they will retire, as well as facilities around the world. And while the government sets the policy and the regulatory framework for safe decommissioning, waste producers and owners in Canada are ultimately responsible for funding and organizing the decommissioning of their facilities and follow the applicable waste management steps. And I would say that Canada, ultimately regulates 3 different strategies for decommissioning, which includes immediate decommissioning, deferred decommissioning, and in situ decommissioning. And the latter of which, in situ decommissioning, can only be considered under exceptional circumstances or for legacy sites. So a country's decommissioning policy may also include target end states, such as an unrestricted end state where sites are released for unrestricted use, or restricted sites whereby there are some restrictions that will remain in place on the site after decommissioning has occurred. We go to slide 10. So this is the final topic identified in the 4th discussion paper. And in Canada, radioactive waste is safely managed to protect people and the environment now and the future. Waste producers and owners, as I mentioned previously, are responsible for funding and organization and management of their disposal facilities and locations or sites. And this is identified as well in the existing policy. Disposal of radioactive waste is the final step in the management of radioactive waste, and it ultimately refers to the placement of radioactive waste without the intention of retrieval down the road. As the level of radioactivity in the waste increases, so does the associated level of hazard and the degree of isolation or containment that's required to dispose of the radioactive waste. And different types of disposal facilities may include near surface disposal facilities might be appropriate for low level radioactive waste, while you may have, for example, the deep geological repository for spent fuel or high level radioactive waste. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, a country's national policy can also include a number of elements that relate to disposal, such as the state's intention to inform the public about a proposed plan for radioactive waste management, whether the state's disposal facilities would only accept radioactive waste from of national origin or waste from other member states as well, in consideration for radioactive waste to be managed in such a way to avoid imposing an undue burden on future generations. I'm not going to go through slides 11 through 13 in detail, but just to note that there are some slides here with some questions where we're looking for feedback on. And it's really, as I mentioned, these questions are ultimately to guide discussion and input on the policy review, and are not in any way meant to limit the discussion. So we go to slide 14 in terms of next steps. Ultimately, we're going to take back the input that we've been receiving throughout our engagement process and what we receive from you going forward. And we're going to include that into a what we heard report. And it would ultimately be all of the feedback that we receive will be consolidated and brought together. So in terms of the feedback that we've been receiving, I know that I mentioned upfront that we've been meeting with Indigenous communities, non-government organizations, interested citizens, industry, municipalities, and academia and youth, to name a number of different organizations and groups and governments that we've been meeting with. And we're strongly, I would say, suggesting as well the submission of written input into our process going forward. And we're working with our web team in terms of going through those submissions and making them available for viewing going forward as well. So we want to be as transparent as we can be as part of our process, another key pillar. We're planning to release the final What We Heard report in the summer or fall, as well as with a draft policy that would be available for further comment. And one of the things that we can note as well, we do have an engagement summary report on our website currently, which sort of covers what we've heard sort of between the launch of our engagement through to the middle of February. And we hope to have another second engagement summary report on our website within the coming weeks as well. So even though our core engagement phase ended on May 31st, we recognize the need for flexibility and the need for some additional time for certain individuals and communities. And that's why we've been adapting our process and working to ensure that we have provided the information and the time needed in terms of providing input. So we welcome any comments that you may have, including written submissions on the topics that we've discussed today. And please send your written submissions to the team, and we'll go maybe in a moment here on the website to take you through how to do that. But also you can provide comments directly to, I think April mentioned to April in the office. And I really wanted to thank you very much, ultimately, for taking time out of your schedule to be here this evening or to listen to this webinar in the future. I know that everybody's schedules are very busy, so thank you very much for your time. And with that, maybe I'll turn it to Julie, who can walk us through our website a little bit, just to take us through that.
Perfect. Jim, can you just confirm that you can see the website?
Yes, it's on the screen. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you. So to go to our website, you would type in radioactive waste, radwastereview.ca, and it brings you to our homepage. So we just scroll down a bit. We're on our homepage right now. I just wanted to highlight a couple of points that Jim maybe brought up. So on our homepage, we have something called the discussion. And Jim mentioned we have our 4 discussion papers on here. So waste minimization.
Sorry, Julie, I think your screen has somehow shrunk.
Okay.
Yeah, you might need to reload. I'm not sure. Okay. Oh, there we go.
Oh. Ah. Oh, technology. Okay. How's that, Jim?
Perfect. I can see it again. Yes.
Okay, Great. Okay. So under the discussion, we have waste minimization, waste storage, and decommissioning and waste disposal. So to learn more about these, you can go to this button here. But we also have more, learn about radioactive waste and learn about our current policy right now, which Jim touched on. And there's another button here called What We Heard. And Jim mentioned that we've published our first engagement report. So to go here is to see our first engagement report. And then other kind of information of interest would be, there's a button here in email to contact us. So I know April said that you are more than welcome to submit comments through her. However, if you want to submit comments to NRCan and our team, please use this button here. If you're on Twitter, you can also follow the discussion on our Twitter, and here's our handle here, Rad Waste Review. And also on here is the subscribe. So if you want to subscribe and receive our updates, please do that. And I'll turn it back to Jim, and you'll also tell me if I've missed anything on our webpage as well that you wanted to let people know about.
No, I think that's great, Julie. Thanks for putting that up on the screen and sharing it. At this time, I guess that maybe I'll turn it back to April in terms of where we go from here.
Yeah, thank you, Jim and Julie. So that was great. I really appreciate, you reaching out to the community and wanting to get feedback from the SON members. I think this is a really important issue, and I think a lot of people would have comments and ideas that they will submit. So I hope we get the word out a little bit better and we'll get some answers for you. So I didn't really see any comments or questions pop up. So if we just want to wait a minute or two, if people want something, if they want to type something, I do see that we have a few attendees with us. So if you do have a question, maybe hit the raise hand button so I know you're typing or that you're on the line and you do have a question, so we don't just cut you off. Oh, here we do. We have a comment. So we have a comment saying, are the overarching principles on the website?
Yes, they are. And they're identified. Ultimately, there's the existing policy, so the principles that exist currently. But we had also identified a few guiding principles as part of our review as well. I think safety and security is something that we will always continue to incorporate into our policy as well. We also noted the need for Indigenous reconciliation to be identified as well. So if you go to our website and click about the policy review, I think that's where you'll find that information.
Thank you, Jim. So I'll give it another few minutes there, but I'm going to share my screen for a brief moment and I'll talk about our survey that we had made up.
Perfect.
So if you can see this, we do have a prize for anyone that does complete the survey and submit their answers to us for the NRCan survey on the radioactive waste review. So we have this cute little bundle. We have some camping chairs, some little sticks to cook over the fire, a really nice fire pit that was actually made by a local artisan in the area. We have some citronella candles, some bug spray, just because mosquitoes might be out or something. So be sure to enter the survey, submit your feedback to those questions, share it with your family, share it with your friends. It's a really great bundle, and I hope someone does win that. And I'll stop sharing that there. See if any questions came up. No. So I'm just going to send the link for the survey here. So it is on SurveyMonkey, and all the questions are there. If you have any issues, you can always reach out to me or anyone at the office if you need some help with that. Be more than happy to help you. So I think that concludes tonight's webinar. Thank you, Jim, Julie, Haj, for joining us and explaining more about the policy. The policy review, I think, is a very important step. And like I said, I think SON members are going to have a lot to say, and I do appreciate you taking the time tonight.
Likewise, we very much appreciate the time and working with you for the past little while to help organize this session, as well as with Kat. So thank you, April. And thanks, everyone.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. I hope you all have a good evening, and we'll see you next week for our next webinar series.